Welcome back, everybody. And after about a couple of weeks of a lot of technical behind the scenes challenges that we have gotten pretty much all organized, we should have our Nature Care Solutions Reclaim Your Power to Heal course available and cart open this Sunday or Monday. So if you have not had a chance to check that out, just pop over to the inspirehealthpodcast.com, click over to courses, and then you will see the under Inspire Life Multiversity, the newest platform that we have created. Under the first course that will be offered is the Nature Care Solutions Reclaim Your Power to Heal. If you have not had a chance yet, go check that out. Click on the link and just sign up for the waitlist, and we will have a special bonus offer that will be going out only to the people on the waitlist. So hopefully that should be going out on Sunday or Monday. So make sure you're on the wait list. If this course appeals to you in any way and you want to learn more about it, just hop on there and then we will get more information out to you on Sunday or Monday. We're super excited to launch this 8-week live comprehensive course teaching you how to manage so many different things without medications. I think it's going to be a really fun time. It's going to be really interactive, and I got some really exciting things to share with you guys. So check that out if you have not had a chance yet. And I look forward to working with you if you sign up to the course. All right, today we are talking to Guy Lawrence. I was recently on Guy Lawrence's podcast called Let It In. We were talking about metaphysics and spirituality and health. He runs a really amazing podcast, and he's done a lot of work in the wellness as a wellness entrepreneur, and he's had his own set of spiritual awakenings and outer body experiences, and we wanted to bring him on and share his experience with everybody. So we have a phenomenal conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure to please like, subscribe, and share this content. It helps us so much in being able to get these messages out. And again, click the link and sign up on the wait list and check out the course. If it appeals to you in any way, just go and take a look at it. I've spent a lot of time putting this information together, very much based on my experience when I was in Mexico for about a year, having to care for my own family and a number of other families while we were there. So, all right, everybody, much love to you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast. And today's guest is Guy Lawrence. And Guy is a successful entrepreneur in the health and wellness field. He's a fellow podcaster and consciousness retreat facilitator. And I came across Guy's work probably about 2 years ago, close. I was actually looking for more interviews that RJ Spina had been on because we were about to interview him. And I came across your podcast and just thought, man, this guy's doing some awesome work. So, and then recently I was on your show talking to you about health and spiritual. We had an awesome conversation. I thought you'd be a wonderful guest to be on here because as we were chatting, you had mentioned that you had your own specific spiritual awakening. You've had near-death experience. You've had a lot of really, I think you've been on a journey, a personal journey for decades, and I think that's really important to share with everybody as much as you're able to, and help everybody else sort of normalize some of this experience that they might be going through. One of the things you talked about was understanding what truly makes us happy, healthy, and fulfilled, and I would love to dive into that in more detail. And at the end of your experience, I think at the end of your spiritual awakening, you were talking about how your intention really sort of solidified on wanting to be able to really help others explore their own inner selves and realize that they are much more than the physical body and live with more heart and soul in their day-to-day lives. Well, Guy, I tell you, I think that is the biggest goal that I think we can all work towards. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. What an honor. I know we were just talking off air. It's not that often I get on the other side of the microphone, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes. So I'm all yours, and hopefully I can share some wisdom today to pass on.
I love that the last interview, you and Jay got online and you realized that you guys were both wearing dark navy shirts. And today as well, we're all on wearing a black collar shirt as well.
Yeah, and our biogeometry gear. Yeah. We were both decked out in that. So
yeah. We've all got the bling on.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Guy, I'd love to hear you share your story a little bit because I mean, you started off as a plumber and then went to like wellness entrepreneur and now conscious retreat facilitator. I want to hear that story because I think that's got to have a lot of interesting points in it.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I'll try and keep it brief because obviously, when you're nearly 50 years old, you can cover a lot of ground if you want to. So I won't bore everyone. But essentially, when I reflect back on my journey and my story, yeah, I grew up in the valleys of Wales. I was playing rugby from the age of 6 or 7 years old. Is what you did. I mean, I'm 6'4". I was a big kid, a big guy, and it's like, yep, play rugby kind of thing, you know. And my dad used to work a lot, so he was away a lot. There was always financial difficulties, and then my mom started to work as well. So I kind of had this free roam to a degree. I used to get away with a lot, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm off to school, and never went to school, and used to just hang out and play with the kids, and then come home and oblivious to it, and take advantage of the challenges as a kid, I suppose. But by the time there was definitely a like a strong pull within the heart within me, even from 12, 13, 14, and really questioning and trying to understand the meaning of life. I remember thinking about it back then. And it was in a recession. I was coming out of school with no qualifications. I started working in a nightclub. I wasn't even 15. I look back now and think, wow, I was doing that and being witness to that. And then rugby was my passion, but then I ended up plumbing and doing an apprenticeship because it was like, hey, get a job. You're lucky to even have it. There was a recession. And I remember being paid £30 a week on this youth training scheme. And none of it made sense. And it was empty. And I'll never forget. And I just want to set up the scene that my auntie came down to visit me. She was like a high flying exec in London. And she came down to visit us. And I came home one day, it was a Friday, and I was only 18 years old. I was exhausted. I'd been rolling around in the loft all morning or all day in the heat. And I was covered in like this fiberglass and solvent all over me from plumbing. And she looked at me, she said, wow, just think you get to do this for the rest of your life. And I remember my heart just sank and it just went through the floor. And I was like, wow, if I don't do something about my situation or life, it will. And there was a collective scheme of events. So that almost depression was starting to kick in then. There was this real unhappiness, but I didn't really have guidance to say, hey, this is the direction you go, or any kind of people to help you into initiate into manhood, really, at the time. So by the time I was 20 years old, I'd finished my apprenticeship, and within a week, I broke up with my girlfriend, my long-term girlfriend. I quit my job and I quit my rugby, and I just left. I left in a panic on a search trying to find more meaning. But then it kind of perpetuate more unhappiness, because then all of a sudden didn't have any infrastructure or friendships, and everything was trying to make sense of it. And I basically came to Australia and backpacked and stayed here for, I think, nearly 3 or 4 years, and traveled and constantly running away from my problems. And it was getting to the point where I was nearly 30 years old, and I still had these underlying beliefs, I guess, looking back now, that were there, that were holding me back from wanting to settle down, because I was basically yearning connection. I was yearning love. I was yearning to be someone. I was yearning stability. I was yearning to be happy and to bring joy in. But it felt like no matter what I moved in towards, it continued to be elusive and avoid me. And that was a really scary time for me, because it's like I can almost see the progression scale, why people end up so in their heads, so depressed, and even start to think about suicide. Not that I got that far, but it was in me. And I was a nice guy. Like I really wanted to just enjoy life. So it was just there. So that really started to turn me on my inward journey. And I was close to 30. I actually emigrated to Australia as the last roll of the dice to go, I've got to find my way. I was back in London. I wasn't happy. And so it was like a fresh start. But this time I'd started listening to Tony Robbins. That really sparked something within me. I started listening to Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra. and starting to listen. And I was getting so much comfort from these. They were CD players at the time. And I think I even still had a few cassette players and a Walkman kicking around back then. But I would listen to them and start going the journey. And I had this idea of that if I make lots of money, I'd be happy. And then I'd go and do what I love, which was totally asked the wrong thing to do, clearly. But so I got into stock trading, believe it or not. And I was studying becoming a fitness trainer, and I ended up working at the university at the same time. So there was this 3 or 4 year period from, early 30s where I borrowed leverage money because I didn't really have much. I would cycle 10 kilometers each day in and out of the city, rain, hail, or shine, on my mountain bike. And it was really hilly area where I lived, out of Coogee and Maroubra, back in eastern suburbs of Sydney. And then I would work a 12-hour shift within the fitness gymnasium of the university. And then I would come back at 9 p.m. at night, and then I would trade for about 3 hours on the American stock market. And I did this for about 3 years, and I just couldn't quite get it to work. There was something inherent in the way. And it got to, and there was this point, and I remember thinking, I'm just digging a deeper hole for myself. I'm getting in more debt. This is clearly not the answer. What is going on? You know, I'm giving you everything, and I'm not getting in return. So that was my tipping point. And then one day I got actually run over. It was a Saturday morning. I was on my push bike, and I remember cycling around a roundabout, and there's this 60-odd-year-old lady that didn't see me, and she just drove, and it was my right of way on the pushy, and she T-barred me. And I remember getting hit, went through the windscreen. I didn't actually go through it, but hit the windscreen in my head, and she kind of drove me about 20 meters up the road. And that was like the breaking point for me. And I remember going, oh my God. And the funny thing was that my girlfriend at the time that I was dating, she was a fitness trainer too. And she had literally just broke up with me 2 weeks prior to the incident. And it turned out the lady that ran me over was her client, which the synchronicity of that. And then from that point, she then rang me on the Monday to see if I was okay, because she'd found out. And then she decided to tell me she'd been cheating on me on the phone at that point as well. So there was this cascade of issues and problems that just made me just want to just crawl under a rock and never be around people again. So that was like a big catalyst for me. And I think I had to go through that metamorphosis of almost like my dark night of the soul early in some respects. And I remember at the time, there was a friend of mine that was wanting to share about a charity that were helping people with cancer in the weight training industry. And they were doing weight training to actually support people with cancer. And he said, I think you'll find this fascinating and what they were doing, and really looking at a holistic approach. This was like back in 2006 or something. So then I think having to go through all that, it allowed me to give up the stock trade and allowed me to just reset my life, because I was clinging on to something and I couldn't see it. That wasn't working for me. And that was a big lesson, huge lesson for me now that I've been able to, if it's not working, just completely re-steer these days. And I think that was part of my spiritual evolution and growth at that point. And then from there, working with people with cancer, off and on while in the fitness industry, sparked the idea of bringing in a natural supplement company. And at the time, I just gave it a go. I started reading books. I was ferocious, but that really lit something up in me. I could see the difference between driven by passion and before I was driven by fear. And I think in society, we so often are driven by fear more than the passion and the joy that lights something up inside. So that was my first real big lesson to see, wow, I'm actually doing this because I love the idea of getting out there, helping people. And from that point, Lord and behold, the company, I'd met my ex-business partner at the time, about a year later. And within 3 years, it was a multi-million-dollar company. And I went on this trajectory from having to ride the push bike every day, rain, hail, or shine. I didn't pay myself for the first 3 years while we were trying to build a company. I was living a double life still, but it was more with passion now. And then I went out and bought a Ducati. I was living in a beach pad in Maroubra. And again, I still wasn't happy. There was that still fundamental feeling that I couldn't pull like the splinter out of my soul. And I'd started looking at exploring the inner work deeper. So I think that was then the tipping point that led to the spiritual awakenings. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Is there anything you want to add to that, or
No, that's okay. It's good to hear your story. That's beautiful.
And isn't it so much the way it goes? It's like, I mean, there's so many things there that I want to jump into on that, but you almost go from like very little and you're not happy. And then you kind of think it's almost like this contrast. Now, at that point, you're like, okay, well, maybe what's going to really feel better is when, and all of a sudden you got all of this other stuff there and you kind of realize, okay, maybe there's some conveniences, but it's still not what you were looking for. Right. And, you mentioned something before when you talked about being on the quest for more meaning and moving through all of these different places and looking for it. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've generally found in my life. It's like when I've had that full motivation to go and find it, I usually don't actually find it. It's usually when I actually hit the point where I'm sort of like, I like surrendered all over. Literally the feeling of like you get on your knees and you're just done and you just sort of surrender it all over. And then it's from that place that it sort of like finds its way to you. There's something in that process of surrender that I find so incredibly transformative and powerful. And then what usually happens is what I thought that I was looking for actually turns out to be something very different than what originally I thought my quest was for. How did that play in with your life? Or did you have a different type of an experience when you kind of found that meaning that you were looking for?
So it's almost like the motivation of the ego as opposed to giving over to grace.
1000%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The quote that was ringing in my head as you were sharing that then was, "You need to be dismembered to remember," and that's truly what happened. There's definitely a part of you. I think I just didn't believe. There was an inherent unconscious part of me that didn't believe abundance, joy, love, peace was possible, even though in my heart and soul I believed it, but there was always this block to it. And I think that the pressures of the challenges, and when I look upon the soul's journey, is that we need to go through these initiations to allow ourselves to, I guess, like if you think about it, if we are the source separated from self, to allow us to have an awareness and experience of oneself, then we need to go through the physical challenges and the experiences through the five senses to allow the soul to evolve and grow. But at the same time, we kind of fall into the trap or the illusion that that's who we truly are. And when you've got a society around you telling you, you need to buy this, you need to do that, this is how you should dress, this is how you should look, this is how you should behave, and constantly indoctrinating you from the moment you're born, it's freaking challenging to actually be able to become the witness, to see beyond all that, to see the essence of who you really are, the beautiful soul that when you brought into that world, when you're pure truth and you're pure love, and that you're there, the moment you're getting programmed, conditioned from that day dot. And the for me, the journey then is really bringing that aspect of yourself back into alignment to yourself. But you can't force it, you can't push it. And so often we're not even aware of it, that we then just go and do really, I was going to say dumb things, but things that we think that we need to feed. But all we need to do is it's like leaving you can't encourage a rose when to blossom. But if you set up the environment and the space and hold that space for it, it will blossom when ready. And I feel like that's what it is. So it's about coming back and finding contentment in the labor of love in every moment that we do, and being conscious enough to do that. So then ultimately, for me, the one thing I then realized was that awareness was key. And it's about an expansion of awareness to shift the perspective, to allow us to meet the moments from a different space, so we can start to have a labor of love in each moment, and start to live with joy in our heart. And I truly believe, because I feel I'm a result of that, is that we don't have to live 70-80% from the hormones of stress and buy into what society is telling us, but we can actually live much more from a place of peace, joy, and happiness. Even though when challenges arises, of course, we need challenges to grow, but to spend most of our time in that state. And I find now that I'm much more in that state, my life is very simple. I do simple things. Nothing that exciting goes on. It might feel exciting from the outside looking, oh, you're doing a podcast, you're running retreats and workshops, but I really focus on just enjoying my life, enjoying being a dad, enjoying being a husband, and exploring the world around me. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's where I feel
Yeah,
it's
I
going.
think this is the challenge of the times, Guy. I really think it just keeps coming up more and more because there's more and more outside influences. There's more and more stuff. I mean, it's an endless amount of things that we can be trying to fill whatever it is that we're trying to fill, and still never feel complete. I really do think that the challenge of this times is can we, in the midst of so much external stuff, can we connect back to that inner voice, that sort of own knowing, where ultimately I just find like when we do, and when we actually listen to it and then take heed of that and then put that into our lives, um, I would say you can do all sorts of really great things, but it feels a lot simpler. Like
Mhm.
it feels like what really means a lot to you. I find it simplifies right down to a few key things, and then you're not actually so pulled off into all these other directions so much looking for something. It really sits home. I mean, I would say the same thing for us. I mean, in so many ways, we've dramatically simplified our lives when we've really taken heed and listened to more of that heart knowing, as opposed to what we try to rationalize, right? Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and I find and then it's just when you're living that way, you your decisions even become easier because you know what just means more to you, and a lot of other stuff doesn't mean so much. And then I think the things actually just keep kind of falling back in place. You come in contact with the people that are more on that same sort of wavelength, and it's again, you had mentioned around the challenges. I think sometimes that's where maybe we get stuck sometimes, is thinking that when we're operating from that way that we don't run into challenges anymore. It's like, well, that's completely BS, because it's not like you don't get challenges. Like you said, you need to have challenges in order to grow and evolve. And it was explained once, I think RJ Spina actually talked about this once, but he talked about the difference between sort of suffering and pain. And he said, pain's inevitable. If you're here in this physical body, you will experience pain. Like he says, he still experiences pain regularly, but he doesn't suffer, and suffer is so much of that. I think of it like that Buddhist sort of second arrow that we do to ourselves, because we get so caught up in the identifications and false perceptions and the storylines that we just keep creating more and more stuff in our life that's really not even real. And it's like, if that stuff starts to get out, you just realize there's a lot less there that we have to kind of create a lot of suffering around.
exactly. And it's the resistant to that we perpetuate is where the suffering then starts to come, and we see it all the time. We're just constantly resistant. And the other thing to mention about that, about doing simple things, it's like I enjoy I'll have a glass of wine once a week, right? And from being from Wales that was in a drinking culture, to not drinking, to I'll enjoy a glass of wine once a week. But But I'm having the glass of wine because I want to enjoy it and celebrate life. We have a date night, so it's not, I don't drink alcohol to escape from something, what I'm resisting to. I don't go, like we're about to go to Europe because we're going to run our retreat in Portugal in July. And the idea of going to Europe this time is exciting, where before, when I used to travel so much, I was traveling to escape myself or have a holiday from the reality of, just to put it on pause so I don't have to deal with these things. And I think I even see it now when we run our workshops and things, that people are actually coming to them to escape their life and hope to have an experience to stay away and not face the things that we need to address and the very things that we're resisting. So we tend to perpetuate it in all these areas. So I'm all for having experiences and living life, but it's about bringing that aspect of yourself to it, that whole aspect to it, so you can really, if you eat the apple, you get to taste it, or if you have your meal, you get to enjoy it, and not just rush, busy, and avoiding the very things that need to be addressed, that accumulate, because they can feel so big, they can feel huge. But ultimately, if we don't start to look at those aspects of ourselves, I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back with a lot of regret. That I think that's my biggest fear, to be honest with you, and not knowing that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And Guy, when you were going through that, for people that are curious and question that, how do you know when you are doing something from a place of sort of resisting, or trying to escape something versus when it really does feel like you're being called to it? How would someone be able to discern the difference and how that shows up in their life? Because we can fool ourselves a lot of times too, right?
Yeah, great question. I for me, the first thing I had to do was reconnect to my body, reconnect to myself, and actually create space in my life. So what I started to do was I'll never forget, I actually grabbed my TV and I turned it to face the other way. And it stayed like that for about 9 years. Right. I remember, it's going off topic, but I remember my flatmate at the time, his girlfriend came over and said, "Oh, Obama's been elected," and I was like, I knew, I think I'd heard about the first Black president being elected, but I had no idea what he looked like. I hadn't paid any attention. I kind of just removed myself completely from all external influences. So I think it's really important that we can start to create space and allow. But the challenge with that is that feels so uncomfortable if we're used to constant stimulus. I mean, I spoke to Paul Check on my podcast literally 2 days ago. I had him on. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he read a book in the 90s. I can't remember the book off the top of my head, but within the book, they were saying the nervous system receives more information it does in a day than it did in a lifetime before 1900.
Wow.
Right. So when you think about that, no wonder we can't discern what's in our head and what's in our heart. And and as you know, with a stimulated nervous system, you're going to have a stimulated mind. And if we're constantly unconsciously addicted to the chemicals and hormones that stress creates and that stimulation creates, just like quitting sugar, the first time we deny ourselves of that, the body's going to start freaking out. And then we're going to find ways to do that. So I think there has to be an initiation, some kind of detox, some kind of surrender and letting go. And sadly, we only allow ourselves to do that when the pain is so great, we can't cope with the pain that is there. So then we then feel like we're forced into a new direction, but then we get momentum to it. But obviously, why wait, right? So to then be able to get the discernment, just to kind of wrap it up, then I started to really start to distinguish the difference between being in my head and just being present. And then from present, one of the biggest aha moments for me was really understanding and feeling into the wisdom of the heart. because once I ever had my first experience of actually my energetic heart opening and actually feeling that, like it wasn't metaphorical, it was real. It's like, holy shit, there is a torus of energy coming out of my heart right now. What the hell is going on? You know, it's like, this is nuts. So then all of a sudden all you need is a hook. You just need a thread. You just need something that creates a new pathway, a new direction, and a new reference point. And you go, oh, that's what everyone's been talking about. That's what every book and mystic and culture is on about right now. But I've embodied it and experienced it for once. So then on reflection, that having to go through creating space and detoxifying yourself, I guess, from the stimuli of the world, and I'm starting to be more present. It's such a necessary requirement to allow even the body just to want to reset and recalibrate, get back to itself, so you can start to get more in tune. I think if it's handed to us on the plate, we just won't learn. We're just not going to gain any wisdom from those experiences. And how do we grow from that? You know,
And it has to be our choice. We have to kind of have those experiences to then make different choices, right? Otherwise, I don't think any of it really means anything. One thing that can be tricky is when in that process, when you remove yourself from all external influences, and I totally know what you mean by that. A lot of times people in your life don't really know what to do with that. You know, like they think something's gone dramatically wrong, and sometimes it's even hard to even try to explain what that process can be like when you literally are trying to remove yourself from maybe what you've known and what's been some of the bigger things that have been influencing for you, for good or for bad, whatever those terms even mean. But you just want to separate from all of it just to try to hear your own inner voice more clearly, so that you're not just being influenced by almost anything outside of, like, and I'm talking, like media and all that stuff, but even like friends and family. Sometimes you need to pull back just so you can get a really good sense of your own voice, and then operate from that place without so much influence. Did you come across that sort of experience at all? And how do you navigate that when that's happening?
it's challenging. And when I really was in that place, looking back, I didn't have children. I wasn't married. Social media was, I think Facebook was just coming out. You know, the iPhone had just come out, so we weren't bombarded the acceleration is there. So I think in that time of my life, and because I was searching, I guess the decisions I'd made my entire life that kept me out of the system was starting to pay dividends at this point, even though I'd probably gone through 10 years of real suffering in silence to be in that position now. So that's a really great point. But even as our company today with Live and Flow, we set up environments to help people, support them through these processes. So it's if we want it, it's available, you know. So the other thing that I did, though, that really landed for me was that I understood that I need to become the person I want to be now. That if I want to meet a caring, loving, beautiful soul that I want to spend the rest of my life with, I have to be a caring, loving, beautiful soul now, and start to embody those qualities. And I understood that being in a place of gratitude, even for the smallest things, was critical. Like, that was landing for me. So what I would do was, every time I would go out, I would actually start to be playful and have fun and be more present. So if I walked into a coffee shop and I saw somebody that was miserable serving me, I'd make a challenge and say, right, let's see if I can get a smile on this person's face within the next 30 seconds, you know, and just play little games with myself and have fun and actually, without anything wanting in return, brighten somebody else's day up. And that actually fed me in such a great, in a way that I'd never been fed before, at the soul level, if you like. And that was starting to spark more inspiration within me, because I was starting to get out of my own way and just try and enjoy the simplicities of life. And I think at the time I was listening to a lot of Wayne Dyer, and that would kind of spark those kind of that attitude and that thinking of how I would show up. And it really set the platform. That's how I was able to actually lean into creating the company 180 Nutrition back in 2010, because of the way I just remove myself and just be more present. So I wasn't actually hunting for that at the time. That came from being just more, I've let it all go. I've let all the training go. I've let all this push go. I've let everything go. I've got to the point where I couldn't, I just don't care less anymore. But not from a not caring place, but from it is what it is. And I'm now literally going to start focusing on nurturing myself back to a place of just being content and happy, you know. And I used to have friends, people that I knew through the surf club, or where I used to volunteer and did my surf bronze medallion at the time. You know, we'd be a similar age, and some of them would rock up in a BMW, and they were established in their law firm and things, and I'd be with them. And then there's me, you know, still on my push bike, scraping to get by. And, you know, it was so easy to want to then compare myself to them in their position, if by buying into how society should be, you know. But he never looked at it. He never looked at me that way. It was just me of how I was then imposing that upon myself, you know. So they were all really valuable lessons to start chipping away and really taming the ego and coming back into this congruency where you work with heart and head that serves you moving forward. Again, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but ultimately that's what I did. And that's how it was for me, really, in those
Yeah,
times.
no, I think all of that is really insightful. And the reason I bring it up is just because I know a lot of people, particularly right now, that are often in relationships, they've got families, and they're going through a lot of this transition where they're getting a deep, I think, yearning to go deeper within, to try to make sense out of certain things going on in the world, going on in their life, trying to find a different sense of meaning. And it can be tricky when you are, you know, your life as we sort of have it in this physical reality is kind of set up and it's running. And, you know, if you change too much stuff, you put monkey wrench in the way the whole system works. And it can just be a challenging time for a lot of people that I think are really wanting to find something more meaningful, and they know there's something that needs to transition, yet at the same time they've got a lot of responsibilities and they've got all these other things, and it's trying to figure out how do you start that process of connecting back to what you really do feel like is important to address in the midst of all of this other stuff going on in your life.
Yeah,
I think
without a
you
doubt.
alluded to it earlier too. It's like, you know, when you turn the TV around, that
Mhm.
was, you know, mitigating a strong influence that comes in on a regular basis for a lot of people, or just taking yourself from things that influence you, even on a subconscious level, that ways that we might not be aware of. So spending more time in nature. We talk a lot about that. And, you know, when Jason's talking about a lot of people have the need to actually just spend a lot more alone time, just to kind of untether from the opinions and the feedbacks and the judgments of others around, so that you can actually get a sense of where you are right now at this moment and what you're needing to breathe through, what you're even needing to sit with, without the influence of everything and everyone that typically, you know, plays on our wavelength. And this is not to mean in a negative or a positive way, but just regardless, if you're trying to figure out where you are and what you're sorting through, it's really useful to kind of go into that cocoon. I mean, we were talking about this just before the recording with you. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that when we spoke of the beginning of the pandemic and where you were at the beginning of that time in 2020.
Yeah, sure. I mean, ultimately, I feel as well that we all have the innate wisdom within us to trust and to lead from that place. And we are so conditioned to look outside of ourselves. symptom, problems, symptoms, whatever they may be, health crisis. We're constantly conditioned to go out there, and yet when the very things you say, going into that cocoon and building that relationship, there's an innate wisdom, and as we learn to nurture that relationship and trust that, we become our own guru. I really believe that. And the more we develop that, we then, that's where our true nature and power comes from, that we're so comfortable in our own skin. We're so trusting of our body and in love with our bodies because of what it's absolutely capable of. And we nurture that relationship to self. So it's critical just to talk on that. And yeah, when the pandemic came around, obviously, like everyone, nobody really knew what the hell was going on. And we were booked to run, funnily, the retreat that we're about to run in Portugal now in July, we had booked for April of 2020?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
I think, yeah. So yeah, the dates. And Linda was pregnant, my wife, with now Ava, and she was due to be June the 12th, on my mum's birthday, funnily enough. But then, of course, the first lockdown started coming in, and we were like, wow, well, what is going on here? And we quickly realized we weren't going to Europe. So that was the first thing we did, was say, okay, let's move that. And but as you could really sense the fear everywhere. And all I wanted to do was take an observation stance and say, I'm just going to sit back here. I've seen how human behavior plays out. I've seen how my human behavior plays out in fearful times in the past. And now here's an opportunity to practice what I'm very passionate about as well, So, and of course, having our first child, as you can imagine, that for me was my greatest unknown, not the pandemic, to be honest with you. I was like, oh my God, I've got much more important things in my personal life to be dealing with. So we literally just started cocooning ourselves in that when the lockdown started to happen, and just focused on making sure that we were in a great space, because the only thing that we wanted to do was nurture this baby into the world and be the best versions that we could under the fatigue and the tiredness and all the other things go on. And there was even getting to the point where they were saying, oh, you might not be able to get in with the birth and things like that, because we were going to home birth, and there was too many complications and risks. So then we found a middle ground with the hospital. But then these other challenges started to arise as well. But I would literally just surrender to it and say, this will be what will be, and I'm confident that as it evolves, this will take care of itself. But I'm not going to buy into that space of fear. And it's very easy, because the moment you get on the phone or somebody, they just amount of conspiracy, like the amount of different things I heard from ideas and opinions from people was just nuts. So it was like, yeah, I'm just removing myself of all of this. Now, what people don't know as well is because at the time, I lost 85% of my business in that moment. I'd sold my company. I was running workshops and retreats. And of course, it just turned over. So I actually sold my Jeep and I sold my Ducati in that year because I couldn't get the government funding. And none of it fazed me. Because I'd been through all of that before. It's like, it's just material shit. I don't care. I'm just going to do whatever it takes to be here. And I knew when we come out the other side of this, what we were creating was very special. And then we used the opportunity, actually, myself, Matt, and Petra, who run the retreats, to create online space and an online app and all the things in that sort of 12, 18 months that we knew we would never have got to, because we'd be too busy out there. That one of the things that we wanted to do. So all challenges, I feel, if we stop to listen and be present with, there's I feel an opportunity for growth that continues to nurture our soul's growth, if you like, from that. And for me, I look back with fond memories of that incubation of 2 years. I really do. And I know other people in very different situations had great challenges too. And it's not to say that they weren't challenging times, but because of if that was the guy of 10 years ago, maybe before like truly leaning and doing the work, I would have responded a very different way in that moment, in that time. So I guess the lesson is, for me, coming out of that, is the more centered we are and the more grounded we are and the more we nurture the aspects of ourselves, the greater we can show up, no matter what the challenges are, even if we don't think we have the capabilities within them. Because if I'd thought about that before that was happening, oh, you're going to have a lockdown, you're going to be becoming a dad, you're going to have to sell your Jeep and your motorbike just to get, like, I'd freak out,
Mm-hmm.
if I fed it. Even to this day I would. But the fact that, if you're willing to be much more present and aware and just be more moment by moment and allow and nurture those inner practices, then it's incredible how that can navigate you through your life. And it created a trajectory and a momentum coming off the other side of that in a way that was like, wow, quite incredible.
Yeah, I love it, Guy. I think that's an incredibly powerful way to live, to really that moment to moment. And it's such a tricky thing for a society that is geared towards creating 10-year plans and sticking to them and all of these things. And not that there's a problem with creating a sensation and a vision, but it's our attachment and the tethering to all of those things that then I think creates a lot of the fear when it's not happening the way we think it needs to be happening. So that's like living in this place of surrender and just being able to kind of let it go and let it go. And in that process, at least what I've kind of constantly found for us, and it's not always there at the forefront 100%. Like there's times where I'm like, shit, like what's going to happen next or whatever. And then it's a reminder to get back to like, let it go. Don't get caught up in thinking too far ahead. Stay present here. What's coming up right now? What am I to do right now? And getting into that stillness where we can connect to that. Most of the time, I just find like we realize you're held. You really do get held in a lot of ways, in surprising ways, like in ways that I would never have been able to figure out that all of a sudden showed up, or then this took place or this worked out and it came out the other side. And again, it doesn't mean it's not without its challenges, but it's just the relationship with life changes a lot. And I feel like in that process, you're really taking care of yourself because you're not riding these ups and downs swings of fear roller coaster all the time.
And I think that ultimately for us comes from a place of knowing that we're not alone, and we're also not navigating this ship wholly on our own.
Mhm.
So there's definitely a bigger force at play. There's an order to this seeming madness that's taking place around us right now, and causing major changes and shifts within our personal, individual, as well as collective lives right now. So it's that faith and trust. I feel like we go back to, and at first we used to hear those words, for me anyway, a couple of years ago, and it sounded great, okay, faith and trust. But I feel like the more that we're living life on a moment to moment basis, without knowing fully what's coming up next, that element of faith and trust comes on more wholeheartedly, and I can know it viscerally.
Well, it's like you said earlier, it really is experiential. You have to have these experiences because you're informed in a very different way than when we receive information just kind of from the intellect. There's a body experience with it. It's like I don't care too much what somebody else says. I know what my experience was like with that, and I know what my truth around that is, at least at this point in time, until that maybe evolves and changes naturally. But that's what kind of gives you the faith and trust, I think, is through those direct experiences. Which
Yeah.
brings me, I'd love to hear what happened in 2015 for you. That was sort of like a real transitional point, and that was the time you had a spiritual awakening, and I'd love to hear how that sort of transitioned your life and what happened with that.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect, yeah, I find it fascinating. It's a perfect way to segue, because when you talk about faith and trust, they become concepts and they become embodied. And I feel very blessed to, looking back to, I guess, having an awakening moment when you start to truly understand that you weigh more than the physical body, that that the larger aspect of you is non-physical. And it sounds very like you can't even think that way through. But ultimately, it was a series of events that led to what was essentially a spontaneous kundalini awakening, where the energy rises. It comes up from your base chakra through the spine, and it moves through the speed of light. Like it's undeniable force of energy that comes through. But looking back, I think there was an accumulation of the work. Like, remember saying the rose, just when it's ready to blossom, it blossoms. And I'd went through a series of different experiences. I'd spent a lot of time actually working, who's now my business partner, Matt Omo, with sound. And I did a 6-week course with him. And that actually allowed me to heal a lot of grief from my dad passing. And I felt that actually leave my shoulder and my heart in one of the sessions. It was that was profound. So I share this with you, and I saw another lady that actually moved a lot through somatic, moved a lot of trauma and pain that was held in the body, different practices. And what I was doing, I was basically feeling this momentum. That's all I could say. I was like, wow, something's going on here. You don't know what it is, because you've not had it yet, but you know there's something really starting to move. So every morning I would get up, and I would meditate through my energy centers without fail. And we lived under the flight path, funnily enough, myself and my wife. So I went out and I bought noise cancellation headphones. I bought the best ones I could to inspire myself, to make sure, no, I'm committed now. Like, things are going. So I bought these beautiful Bose headphones, and I would meditate for like nearly an hour every single morning, just moving through it. And then I had, in 2015, I was at a retreat, and the next thing you know, I felt this energy shoot through me that was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. And it was like, wow. And that's when I felt it coming through my hands, the top of my head, it's down through my arms, my legs, my feet. I felt this torus just coming out of me. And it was like, wow, is this going to stay like this? Like, this is not, how am I going to function in life? My brain was going on, and I had no idea. And then I laid down, and I closed my eyes, and I settled down. And when they talk about raising your consciousness or vibration, well, mine was raised. And within moments, it's hard to explain, but if you meditate on a regular basis, there's like this moment where there's a drop, and you're out of the conscious, and you're in the field. That's all I can explain in it. And that dropped instantly. And the next thing I know, and I don't think I've ever shared this before on a podcast, a being came up to me, and I could see its face and I could see the outline of it, but I was getting a very clear signal to just surrender, surrender, surrender. And I've been practicing that my whole life. So I literally let go. And then it placed me in this incredible orange cocoon. And it was as orange as orange can be. And it's like as real as this right now. And I was in this cocoon. And then I felt the being starting to work on me on the back of my neck. And I felt it touch my head, and it was sending energy through me. And I felt it starting to correct more of my shoulder. It was just, incredible, absolutely incredible. And I really started to understand that even from then, that we really are, there is a density. And as that density lightens, vibration frequency raises, that once we get beyond the spectrum of light, there is infinite more information, intelligence, whatever you want to call it, that ultimately comes from source. So depending on where you are. So that had that experience, and that lasted. And then once that happened, I kind of come out like, the rabbit in the headlights, like, wow, I've read about these things. I understand these things. I felt energy. But when you start to have an experience like that, you can't undo that. You can't, it's just, so for days I was just with it, pondering about it. And I could feel the energy for days and days. And it finally settled down. But what it was doing as well is, through that, was revealing more and more of the truth of who you are. So what was starting to happen was that I started to realize that I really need to go on a different trajectory. Because remember, I said I had the beach pad, I had the Ducati. I realized I still wasn't happy. Well, it was almost, it felt like I'm remembering who I am, and I'm starting to forget or let go of everything that I thought I would be, which is allowing me to come back closer to the truth. So that happened, but then I'm knee deep in a supplement company with lots of commitments, and it's been my identity, and I realize how much I'm entrenched in it. And then if my heart saying, no, you really need to go in this direction and start to share other people that what's possible at a deeper level, it just felt like I'm over here, and then that's way over there. And it's like, holy shit. So I resisted it at first. I kind of just kept going back for a little while. But then what was happening, I started having, they would start coming to me at 2 or 3 in the morning, because I would lay in bed and that energy would just come on. Spontaneous, like I wouldn't even evoke it. And I'd be laying there, and the next thing you know, it'd wake me up, and my whole body would be vibrating of that energy, and the Taurus was out. I was like, why is this happening? And then I would surrender to it, and then more healing would happen. So it's like now I'm living another double life where this is happening, and then I just go to work back to the company the next day. And it's like, this is okay, something I really need to listen here. And then I'd start having out-of-body experiences as well, where I would lay there, and the next thing I know, I'd be in that feel meditative state, and then I would go out of body. And they were all, looking back, I really truly feel, lessons for me to help me continue to overcome my fears, to start to get closer back to my own truth, and then to surrender into that more. That's all I knew, and that kind of felt right for me at the time. So I knew I was going in that direction, and what it allowed me to do, I think, was to really know that there's way more to this reality than meets the eye. And if I truly want to help inspire people to live more present and surrender, then I have to, again, do the act of surrender and trust and come from the heart and move out of what I'm doing and step into the unknown to make this work more available. So I had to go through that initiation. And that was a really scary time. I was entrenched in a partnership, and the partnership was straining. The company was straining. There was financial commitments, and it's almost like going through a divorce, if you like. But knowing it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'll never forget turning to my wife saying, I think I'm going to sell out and help people to meditate. And she's like, okay, are you going to make money from that? How are you going to do that? But okay, whatever you're going to do, so and that's what happened. And I knew, I then felt I had the skill sets from a business perspective. Like, I'd just spent 8 years building a company, and I kind of knew what not to do now, so in terms of that, so it felt like an apprenticeship. And it's like, right, I'm going to do this and I'm just going to step out. And I literally, when I sold out the company, I had about a year up my sleeve financially to go, okay, I'm going to just start making things start in that direction, not knowing that there was a pandemic or anything around the corner either, or what was coming. But that's essentially what happened in a nutshell. I mean, yeah.
You know, none of it is wasted. I think
Exactly, yeah.
we've learned that over and over again, in that almost in hindsight, looking back at every single experience, trial, challenge, tribulation that we've deemed to be negative, it's all been a learning experience. Like once you're on the other side of it and you're actually able to take a deep breath and look at life with greater clarity, which sometimes we're not able to when we're in the muck, then we're able to see, oh, well, that really served me, and I can utilize that now. Like I'm thinking, even your experience as a plumber, my son, who's 18 now and will be graduating high school soon. You know, this is so unlike my own Persian background, where it was, you know, the academics were really pushed onto myself and my brother at the time. But I'm turning and telling my son, well, like, I think it would be a really great idea if you apprenticed as a plumber or went into landscaping or carpentry, or just, you know, had the skill that you could do something with your hands. Because I feel like that's really of great value for you know, our next series. We're going to be featuring a whole lot of homesteaders, because knowing how to work the land and to be self-sufficient and self-sovereign is a really big deal right now. So even those skills that that you have accumulated in the past, every single one of them, as you know, will continue to serve you.
1000%, 1000%. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is interesting, isn't it? When you reflect back and looking at that, it really is just a matter of perception of how you view things at the time, and how you take it on board, and the wisdom from that, you know. But yeah, totally.
Guy, there's lots that I would like to talk to you about still, but maybe we'll hold this for maybe another conversation. But one thing I'm curious about is, and if people haven't checked out your podcast yet, go and check it out. You've interviewed some amazing guests. You've had some really phenomenal conversations. So we'll put a link to that called "Let It In" with Guy Lawrence. But
and your approach is really honest and heartfelt,
Yeah.
and it comes across in all the interviews. So it's really
Thank
a
you.
pleasure to listen.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really beautiful work. What have been some of the most biggest like aha moments or insights for you from speaking with so many amazing people? I mean, you guys, I think you're close to like 250 episodes now or something. You've been doing it for a while, and some really amazing people. I mean, I know like for us, when we're talking to people, there's often like, oh wow, like that just really flipped my perspective in another way, or really I was able to bring that into my life in a really beneficial way. Anything that jumps out to you that really impacted you in a real positive way?
Wow. Gosh, there's so much, isn't there? Like, I mean, what a privilege to have conversations every week that just inspire you constantly.
Yeah.
I always get off beaming, going, oh, you know. Impact biogeometry, believe it or not, has impacted me in a big way. Like interviewing Doria Karim and then Ibrahim Karim, you know, I explored that, and I had Robert Gilbert on literally the other day as well, that teaches it. So that's certainly been an impact. I love the hero's journey. I really get drawn to listening to people who's on the hero's journey. And it just resonates when people, and that's why I always want to get to the heart of the person, because obviously I've had big profile guests on. Some people sold millions of books and things, which is nice, but I want to get to know the person behind that, because I think we all have a journey to be there, and we can see the, from the outside lens looking in, it can all be very narrow. And I just want to know that. But the hero's journey, the people that have been through some form of initiation or challenge, that have come out the other side, and how they share that, and the steps they took over different times and years to inspire them. Because I think I really get a kick out of inspiring other people. Like it really lights me up, and I think if it comes across in a conversation, I get inspired. I thought, what, when you hear of it, and it also feeds into, wow, how lucky am I? Like how that I hear of some hardships, and things. I thought, wow, my initiation, it felt terrible at the time, but not that I want to compare, but boy, maybe, maybe life's been kind to me, but it all makes sense. So coming from that, they're the things that really jump out at me. But I have to say, spending time with Reverend Michael Beckwith was pretty special as well. I remember coming off that because he'd been in the background as well in my journey, along with the greats, Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra. And then I sit down with him for an hour. I remember being nervous, thinking, shit, I'm about to have a conversation with Reverend Michael Beckwith here. And he was just an amazing human being. He was so beautiful, and he was so caring, and everything was just equal, which it should be. But when they're out there doing their thing for so long, and you get to sit with them, it's like, wow, this is special. And I think from picking up an iPhone in 2012 to interview someone for the first time on my own podcast, to fast forward 10 years later to sitting down with Reverend Michael Beckwith, it's like, wow, I'm glad I had to go, because I'm actually having conversations with all sorts of people, and it's a privilege. Yeah.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask you one last question, if you don't mind. Your role as a father, and how your life has impacted your role as a father now to your child. How would you say that's different from perhaps your father's role as a father to you, and what you saw what fathering is like at that time?
Wow, what a question. I'm getting emotional thinking about it when I think about my father and how he fathered me, because I know he loved me very much, but there was so much pain in there that he just didn't have the tools to work with that at that time, and I feel one of the greater advantages of being a dad later in life, as opposed to if I would have 10 years ago, is that I've really spent the time to heal a lot of my shadows and my inner wounds, which has allowed me to be more present and show up for now my daughter Ava, and really take in the moments and be as present. I'm not perfect, and I definitely wouldn't win Father of the Year, but at the same time, I feel like the fact that I've spent time healing myself is allowing me to show up and be a better dad and hold space for my daughter and have patience. And I've created a lifestyle for me that I have time during the day, that we can go to the park. Like I'll have now for the next few hours this morning, and we'll go and do something in that. And I strive to cherish those moments, to know that she is loved, she is held, and she is safe, and yet safe to explore. Because I want to value her as a unique individual soul too, and not stifle her in any way as we nurture that. And I'm always learning. It's parenting is just like, wow, talk about the fast track to learning, and highlighting what needs to be revealed within yourself is mind-blowing. So there's that constant push and pull and things, but what does spring to mind is that I know I'm a better parent for it, from spending time working on myself over the years than I would have been if I didn't. And if there's not that, if anyone's listening to this, not that giving any, asking for any advice, but if there's one takeaway is that quite often we want to change our kids' behaviors or do this and that to meet our needs. But I really think we need to turn the lens on ourselves and see what needs to be healed within us to allow to become. I feel that's the way forward in becoming a better parent and raising better children, you know. Or,
Beautifully
That's
said.
beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful, Guy. I couldn't agree with you more. I actually think unless we are healing ourselves, we're only able to see so much of our kids too, right? It's like feels like as we heal more of ourselves and get rid of a lot of the stuff that's not really who we are anyways, it's like that sort of sneaks, gradually diffuses out and gives more room to, I think, see what really is true. So particularly in our kids. And I agree with you. Holy cow. Talk about a fast track for learning. We've got 3 and
Ranging from 5 to 18.
wow.
and it's been the most beautiful experience. It can sometimes be the most frustrating and challenging. And but I tell you, it's just yeah, if you really want to explore the depths of being human, you know, having kids is a good way to explore all of that.
Totally.
Guy, oh, I was just going to say, when you were talking about how kids can kind of bring that out, we were talking to a friend of ours who's a shaman, and he was talking about kids are a lot of times like dolphins, where dolphins will often actually come
Give you a bump.
and bump, like he would say, dolphins will actually come and bump you in an area that needs healing. And so a lot of times when our kids do something that triggers us, it's like they're kind of being a dolphin and bumping us where we need to actually heal more. So.
Well, there was actually an example that I'll quickly share. My daughter,
Oh,
who
yeah.
at the time, Sophie, was probably 5, and she actually went and she was, playing punching with grandma. And grandma gets down and she takes, the gloves off and she'll go right in with them, at the tender age of, I think, 71 at the time. And Sophie went in and just did this to her face. And she actually took out a tooth, like her front tooth, she took it out, like it became loose. And so we ended up taking her to the dentist the following day. Lo and behold, after the x-rays came back and the dentist examined it, she actually had an infection under that tooth brewing. So our daughter, Sophie, literally gave her the bump, the dolphin's bump.
So I think whether that's like a physical thing that needs healing or some sort of mental, emotional healing, it's like pay attention when your kids do something. Now it's more kind of, we question, wonder what else might be going on. So it kind of leaves a little opening to explore a little more deeply.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't heard that, but yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Every day.
Yeah. Amazing. Guy, where can people learn more about the work that you're doing and anything that you've got coming up?
And a little bit more, maybe information about the retreat you have coming up.
Yeah. So we generally hold them within Australia 3 or 4 times a year. And then we're exploring overseas as well. So which is Portugal in July. There's some spots left for that. So if I've never been to Portugal, so I'm very excited. I think we're doing 6 days there, 5 nights, 6 days. And there's 3 facilitators that we all offer very different skill sets coming together, basically, So if anything resonates today, then the retreats are certainly something I'd encourage to lean into. We've witnessed some profound things. But liveinflow.co is where all that work can be found as well. And myself and Matt, who works with sound, we run workshops up and down the country as well, one day as introductory, which are powerful in their own right as well, so it gives people at least a taste and an experience from there. And if people want to check out my podcast, just type Let It In into any podcast player. They'll find it and find me for sure.
Awesome. We'll have all of that in the show notes, and everybody can check that stuff out and links to the retreat. So, Guy, what a pleasure. That was really fun. What an awesome time having you on this side of the mic instead of the other one. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
thanks
you,
so
Guy.
much, Guy.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.